June 7, 1944. A map, a hand, and what may have been the last real chance to drive the Allied invasion back into the sea. At a planning table near Paris, pins marked the positions of panzer divisions arrayed for a single, concentrated counterstroke. The officer bending over those pins was General Geyr von Schweppenburg, the man history sometimes shortens to Gyre, and the central figure of a decision window that would close in 72 hours. He had trained for maneuver warfare, rapid concentration, armored shock, and the expectation that massed tanks could restore a front. What he did not have an answer for was the sky that now belonged almost entirely to his enemy. On D+1, the German plan was simple in design and brutally time-sensitive in execution. If large armored forces could reach the Normandy beaches within 48 to 72 hours, a concentrated blow might dislodge the Allied lodgment before it consolidated. That plan depended on predictable fast ground movement, fuel and ammunition delivered along roads, signals and reconnaissance intact, bridges and junctions usable. It depended on logistics, soft things that armored armies often take for granted, and it depended on command and control, intact staff headquarters, able to coordinate divisions and marshal reserves. The morning reports that reached Panzer Group West began as small frictional notes that every commander expects after a large enemy landing: delays at crossroads, one transport head-on, individual convoys hit by strafing. Then the messages changed tone. Multiple columns reported burning fuel wagons and destroyed soft-skinned vehicles. Radio transmissions grew intermittent as signal trucks were knocked out. Commanders complained of mounting delays at predictable choke points. A pattern emerged. Movement was being shaped, funneled, and increasingly punished. What the map could not show was what was flying above it. If one image captures the transformation happening over Normandy in early June 1944, it is not a tank turret, but a low-slung thunderbolt diving on a roadside convoy, or a typhoon streaking in with rockets and cannon. The Allies had assembled unprecedented tactical air resources for a combined operation. The U.S. 8th and 9th Air Forces and the RAF's fighter-bomber wings made available vast numbers of aircraft, whose primary mission in the days after the invasion was not air superiority over air-to-air duels, but interdiction, the systematic destruction of the enemy's ability to move and sustain forces on the ground. Interdiction is a concept often more strategic than spectacular. It means attacking the arteries that feed an army. For an armored force, the arteries are fuel tankers, transporters carrying spare track and guns, signal vehicles, and the soft-skinned trucks that carry ammunition and infantry. When those arteries are severed, tanks become isolated, immobile islands. Armored brigades lose their eyes and ears. Headquarters cannot see a front that is no longer contiguous. The Allies had prepared for that from before D-Day. Pre-invasion bombing had wrecked many rail junctions, severed secondary lines, and made movement by rail increasingly dangerous or impossible. That damage forced German transportation onto a smaller set of roads. Allied planners expected this and deliberately funneled movement into channels they could cover with fighters. Reconnaissance aircraft and photo intelligence turned a destroyed rail map and a network of roads into a menu for the tactical air forces. If German armor had to move along certain predictable routes, fighters could find and attack it there again and again. The aircraft at the center of this story were built for one thing: to come down hard on ground targets. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt combined velocity and payload. It could carry bombs and multiple high-explosive rockets, while its 850 caliber machine guns made short work of soft targets. The Hawker Typhoon, flown by the RAF, was specifically lethal against vehicles when armed with rockets. The 3-inch projectile, known as the RP-3, could rupture fuel tanks, disable transmissions, and shred soft-skinned vehicles with terrifying efficiency. A single rocket, properly placed, could set a fuel truck ablaze and turn a compact supply convoy into a burning obstruction. Complementing the hardware was a system. Reconnaissance aircraft and photo sections spotted targets. Forward air controllers in light aircraft or embedded with ground units radioed vectors. Mobile radar and liaison units helped clear airspace and route fighters, and centralized controllers allocated aircraft to targets of opportunity. The whole arrangement functioned less like a collection of planes and more like an organism, eyes, nerves, and teeth working in tight coordination. It is also important to note that intelligence, high-level signals intelligence often summarized as ultra, contributed to targeting decisions in ways that would become clearer after the invasion. Ultra provided strategic and operational insight into German dispositions and intentions. In practical terms, for nighttime and planned strikes against headquarters, signals information allowed Allied operational planners to prioritize specific targets for heavy attack. The combination of ultra-derived knowledge and daylight interdiction created a relentless, multidimensional pressure on German mobility and command. Throughout June 7th and the following days, vignettes from the German side paint a picture of growing alarm. Columns that should have been moving arrived halted, waiting for fuel that would not come. Some divisional staff cars were set ablaze. Accounts describe staff officers thrown clear as their vehicles burned, or men ashen and silent watching typhoons skim the orchards and dive for a snagged transport. Tank battalions found themselves stranded on the hard shoulder, engines idling while the fuel they needed lay in blackened pools half a mile back along the road. The loss was not always to armor. Tanks are, by design, survivable. It was to the vehicles that supported them. That is why military historians speak of soft-skinned losses. Trucks, trailers, signal vans, and fuelers, unarmored but vital. The destruction of soft-skinned vehicles translates directly into operational paralysis. As the day wore on, messages to Panzer Group West shifted from operational adjustments to urgent crisis reports. Local commanders improvised, junior officers made decisions on the fly. One reported anecdote, described in post-war memoirs and unit after action returns, tells of a divisional commander who was thrown into a ditch when his staff car was hit and burned. Another account relates of staff officers whose maps and orders were consumed when headquarters areas were fragmented by strafing. Whether every detail is precisely attributable to a single strike or the cumulative effect of air pressure, the feeling on the ground was progressively of being under a campaign of attrition. The enemy did not need to destroy every vehicle to render the formation ineffective. By late afternoon on June 9th and into June 10th, the interdiction effect had become operational collapse in microcosm. Whole formations drifted apart as units stopped to scavenge fuel, to repair punctured tanks, to recover stranded troops. The cohesion an armored force depends upon, combined arms working in concert, timely logistics and centralized command, evaporated under repeated air attack and the denial of secure movement corridors. Mobility, the element that had been the centerpiece of German doctrine, had become a liability without secure lines of supply and communication. Then came one of the most consequential blows of those first days, an intelligence-directed strike against the Panzer Group West headquarters. Accounts of the evening raid describe a concentration of rockets and bombs aimed at the command node itself, whether one calls it a strike on a chateau, a bivouac, or a set of staff positions outside Paris. The operational effect was unmistakable. Staff officers were wounded or killed. Maps and planning material were destroyed or scattered. Radio links were disrupted. Command headquarters is more than a building. It is the locus of cohesion, the place where orders are written, priorities set, and timing coordinated. Damage there is not easily repaired in the middle of a campaign. After that attack, the capacity of Panzer Group West to coordinate a coherent theater-level response diminished sharply. Divisions that might once have been maneuvered as parts of a single synchronized hammer now acted in fragmented bursts. Some commanders launched local attacks to recover lost honor or supplies, others dug in defensively or withdrew to safer ground. The window in which Gyre could have orchestrated a massed counterblow began to narrow into nothing, not because a single bomb or rocket had destroyed the German armor, but because the combined systems above and behind the battlefield had neutralized the essential conditions for armored operations. It is crucial to keep perspective. No single factor won D-Day. The Allied lodgment succeeded because of many converging causes: strategic planning around the coasts, the massing of amphibious lift, deception operations, naval gunfire, and the fierce tenacity of soldiers on the beaches. Yet on the operational level, the fight for the weeks and days immediately following the landings, the integration of air power, signals intelligence, and transportation interdiction decisively reduced the Germans' ability to employ their last operational reserve. Air supremacy, exercised not just as freedom from attack but as active control of movement, reshaped the battlefield. Looking back, this day and the days immediately after D-Day show a transformation in the nature of warfare. Armor remained potent, but its potency depended on a network, fuel and munitions flowing, intact communications, and secure lines of movement. Allied air power, organized as a sensor-shooter system and backed by information from signals intelligence, attacked those networks systematically. The result was a blunt lesson in systems warfare. When one side controls the sky and the flow of information, the other's traditional massed formations become vulnerable in new ways. The human dimension should not be lost amid operational analysis. These were officers who had trained in the classic continental school of maneuver, a general staff accustomed to shifting corps and concentrating punch at decisive points. Faced with a sky that punished movement and a chain of supply that frayed under constant pressure, their strategic space contracted. Men who had become commanders by mastering terrain and armor found themselves contending with a different kind of enemy, persistent, dispersed, and coordinated above them. The psychological effect, uncertainty, loss of initiative, the erosion of command confidence, is as operationally significant as any destroyed transport. By the time June 10th closed, the prospect of a coherent theater-level German counterattack had receded. Panzer Group West retained units, equipment, and courage, but lacked the synchronized logistics and intact command necessary to deliver a concentrated blow. The Allied lodgment, instead of being reversed, hardened into a protracted campaign that would grind and attrit German forces over weeks and months. If there is a lesson that flows from this episode beyond its immediate historical instance, it is that control of domains and information can convert technical advantages into strategic outcomes. Air power in 1944 was not merely a set of platforms. It was an integrated capability that, when combined with intelligence and deliberate targeting of logistics, could neutralize the advantages of a different era of warfare. The day General Geyr faced devastating Allied air power was not the single day that decided Normandy, but it was a decisive day in narrowing his options and denying the German High Command the means to execute the doctrinal remedy they had trained to employ. This account has focused on systems rather than spectacle, the pins on the map, the roads turned into killing grounds, the radios that went quiet, and the headquarters that could no longer coordinate a response. Those elements together show why the first 72 hours after D-Day were so critical. They also show how combined arms, when the air component is integrated with reconnaissance, intelligence, and controllers, can change the calculus of force employment. If this story of June 7-10 interested you and you enjoyed deep dives into operational turning points of World War II, consider liking and subscribing for more detailed explorations of how technology, doctrine, and human decision-making shaped the course of the war. There are still debates and open questions around specifics, exact locations of some skirmishes, precise unit attributions in every vignette, and the micro-level casualty figures that historians continue to refine. But the broad picture stands. Allied air interdiction, Allied intelligence, and pre-invasion transport disruption combined to blunt the last German operational reserve in Normandy. In short, the sky over France had become a decisive battlefield, and on that day General Geyr's plans met an opponent he had not fully anticipated. For those who want to follow the story further, there are linked videos and playlists examining the air war in Normandy, the role of intelligence operations, and the operational histories of panzer formations in 1944. Each adds context to this crucial moment when modern networked air power reshaped a classical face-off between armor and maneuver.